In the early 1940s, the world stood on the edge of catastrophe. World War II was raging across Europe, and Nazi Germany was rapidly expanding its control over the continent. Adolf Hitler's armies were conquering one country after another, and it seemed that nothing could stop their advance. But behind the front lines, a different and equally important battle was unfolding, a scientific race that would decide the fate of humanity. As early as 1938, German scientists made a discovery that shocked the scientific world. They identified nuclear fission, a process in which an atom splits and releases an enormous amount of energy. At first, it seemed like just another scientific breakthrough, but it soon became clear. If this energy could be controlled, it would unlock a power unlike anything ever seen before. And if used as a weapon, the consequences would be unimaginable. Many brilliant scientists had fled Europe, escaping the Nazi regime. Among them were physicists who fully understood the potential danger of this new discovery. One question began to haunt them. What if Germany was the first to build a weapon based on nuclear fission? The idea that Hitler could possess an atomic bomb created deep fear. Such a weapon could completely change the outcome of the war. This concern quickly spread among scientists and government officials. In 1939, a group of physicists decided to warn the United States government. With the help of Albert Einstein, a letter was sent to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. It explained the possibility of a new type of superweapon based on nuclear fission and warned that Nazi Germany might already be working on it. The letter made a strong impression on American leadership. At first, the government did not act immediately on a large scale. But as the war expanded across Europe and later involved the United States, the urgency increased dramatically. The U.S. government began funding nuclear research. What started as small scientific experiments gradually expanded into a larger program. Scientists worked on calculations, experiments, and theoretical models to determine whether an atomic weapon was truly possible. The results were alarming. Theoretical calculations showed that building such a weapon was not only possible, but achievable with enough resources and industrial power. This discovery became a turning point. Soon after, the United States officially launched a massive secret program. This was the beginning of the Manhattan Project, one of the most ambitious and expensive scientific efforts in human history. From the very start, the project was wrapped in extreme secrecy. Thousands of people worked on isolated tasks without knowing the full purpose of their work. Scientists and engineers only saw small pieces of a much larger puzzle. The government was determined to prevent any information leaks at all costs. The best minds from around the world were recruited. Physicists, chemists, mathematicians, and engineers joined forces for a single goal: to build the weapon before Nazi Germany could do the same. Pressure grew every day. No one knew how far German research had progressed. Somewhere in a hidden laboratory of the Third Reich, similar work might already be underway. This uncertainty pushed scientists to work tirelessly, often without rest. The Manhattan Project was no longer just a scientific experiment. It had become a race against time, a race where failure could cost millions of lives. By 1943, it was clear that the theory worked. Building an atomic weapon was no longer a fantasy. The challenge had shifted. Now it was about turning equations and calculations into a real, functioning device of unimaginable power. At that moment, the next chapter of history began. Humanity was no longer asking whether the atomic bomb was possible. The only question left was, who would build it first? By 1943, the Manhattan Project entered a new phase. Theoretical calculations had confirmed that an atomic bomb was possible. Now scientists faced a far more difficult challenge: turning a scientific idea into a real weapon. What had once existed only in equations and research papers now had to become a device of unimaginable destructive power. To achieve this, the U.S. government began building a network of secret facilities across the country. Each site had a specific role in the project. Some focused on uranium enrichment, others on material production, and others on designing the bomb itself. Most workers had no idea what they were actually contributing to. They were only given isolated tasks, unaware of the larger purpose. The center of the entire project became a remote and highly classified laboratory in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Hidden deep in the desert, it looked like an ordinary research facility from the outside, but inside its guarded gates gathered some of the greatest scientific minds in the world. The scientific director of the project was J. Robert Oppenheimer. Despite his relatively young age, he was known for his exceptional intellect and his ability to bring talented people together. His responsibility was to lead the team of scientists working on one of the most complex problems in human history. Physicists, engineers, chemists, and mathematicians from around the world arrived in Los Alamos. Many were already renowned experts who had left successful careers to join the project. They understood they were working on something that could change the outcome of the war and the future of humanity. But building an atomic bomb proved far more difficult than expected. Scientists faced problems no one had ever solved before. Theory could only go so far. The rest had to be discovered through trial and error. One of the biggest challenges was obtaining enough fissile material. The bomb required rare substances, such as uranium-235 and plutonium-239. Producing them demanded massive industrial facilities, advanced technology, and enormous financial resources. Thousands of workers labored in secret plants, many unaware they were contributing to nuclear weapons development. As the months passed, the project grew larger and more complex. Tens of thousands of people were involved. Billions of dollars were invested by today's standards. Despite the cost, the government continued to fully support the program, considering it essential for winning the war. Inside Los Alamos, work continued almost non-stop. Scientists ran endless calculations, built experimental models, and tested new ideas. A single mistake could cost months of progress. Even when solutions looked correct on paper, they often failed in practice. Eventually, it became clear that the project was moving in two directions. One design focused on enriched uranium, while the other used plutonium. Each required a different mechanism and completely different engineering solutions. The plutonium bomb turned out to be especially difficult. Standard methods did not work as expected. Scientists had to develop an entirely new approach called implosion, a method that compresses the plutonium core into a critical state, using precisely shaped explosive lenses. Meanwhile, the war in Europe was still ongoing. Allied forces were gradually advancing, and Germany's position was weakening. However, the work on the bomb did not stop. Even when it became clear that Nazi Germany was close to defeat, the project continued at full speed. By mid-1945, scientists reached the final stage. After years of intense research, it was time to test whether their calculations were correct. The first nuclear test in history had to be conducted. In the New Mexico desert, preparations began for an experiment codenamed Trinity. A tall steel tower was built in the middle of an empty landscape. On top of it stood the device that would determine the success or failure of the entire project. No one could predict the outcome with certainty. Some expected a powerful explosion. Others feared complete failure. A few even worried about unpredictable consequences that no one could fully understand. The night before the test was filled with tension. Years of work, billions of dollars, and the hopes of a nation depended on a single moment. Within hours, humanity would witness a force it had never seen before, and that moment would change history forever. In the early hours of July 16, 1945, in the desert of New Mexico, dozens of scientists, engineers, and military personnel waited for the moment they had worked toward for years. Far from any city in the empty sands stood a device on a metal tower, a weapon capable of changing the course of history. The test was codenamed Trinity. Until the very last second, no one could be fully certain of the outcome. Theory suggested the explosion would work. Calculations confirmed the possibility of a nuclear chain reaction. But humanity had never dealt with such a force before. Many scientists felt not only excitement, but also fear of the unknown. At 5:29 a.m., silence was shattered by a blinding flash. For a brief moment, night turned into day. A massive fireball rose into the sky, followed by a towering mushroom cloud. The shockwaves spread across the desert for miles. Those who witnessed the test understood they were seeing something unprecedented in human history. The first atomic bomb had successfully detonated. Some scientists celebrated the success of years of work. Others realized that the world had just entered an entirely new era. Robert Oppenheimer later recalled a line from the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." These words reflected the emotions many felt at that moment. The test proved that the weapon worked. The decision now moved from scientists to political and military leaders. Meanwhile, the war in Europe had already ended. Germany surrendered in May 1945. However, fighting continued in the Pacific. Japan still refused to surrender despite heavy losses and constant bombing. The American leadership faced a difficult decision. Some believed the bomb should be demonstrated first in an uninhabited area. Others argued that only actual use against cities would force Japan to surrender and end the war quickly. After long discussions, the decision was made to use the weapon. On the morning of August 6, 1945, a B-29 bomber called Enola Gay flew toward the Japanese city of Hiroshima. On board was the atomic bomb, Little Boy. Shortly after, it was dropped over the city. The explosion over Hiroshima became one of the most devastating events in human history. Much of the city was destroyed within seconds. The world witnessed the first use of nuclear weapons in warfare. However, Japan did not immediately surrender. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, a second atomic bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki. It caused massive destruction and demonstrated the full power of nuclear weapons once again. Soon after these events, Japan announced its surrender. World War II came to an end. For many, the Manhattan Project became a symbol of scientific achievement. In just a few years, scientists solved a problem once thought impossible. They created a technology that reshaped the limits of human capability. But the project also raised deep moral questions. Should humanity have built such a weapon? Can its use be justified to end a war? Where is the line between scientific progress and destruction? These questions are still debated today. After the war, a new era began. Nuclear weapons were no longer a secret of a single nation. Other countries soon started developing their own nuclear programs. A global arms race had begun, shaping world politics for decades. The Manhattan Project officially ended, but its consequences continue to this day. It led to new technologies, the development of nuclear energy, and also revealed the terrifying potential of scientific discovery. What began as a secret wartime program became one of the most important events of the 20th century. A project born out of fear and urgency permanently changed the balance of power on Earth. The moment the first nuclear explosion lit up the desert sky, humanity crossed a line from which there was no return. The world would never be the same again.